Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Modern Investing on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today we have our guest, Professor Dr. Milan Sombrak. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. And Jim Eid from Eid Foundations. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Sasha. Great to be here.
Great to see you. So today is Wednesday, and unlike any other Wednesdays, there is a great should I say, disaster happening on the markets. And I think the primary reason for that is that market is now adopting a model when there is no easing on interest rates. And we are have to forget about the goal of 2% inflation. It's going to be 3, 4, 5, maybe even more. And the market have to adapt to that. That's what they're doing in daily today and actually some previous days, and we may see much more of that. Jim, what's your opinion on the situation?
Yeah, I think it's exactly correct that the market is reacting to the Fed's position of backing off their promised reductions in the rates, and there's no clear evidence that they're going to reduce the rates. They need to reduce the rates. It's criminal that they have not yet done it, and their thinking is outdated, outmoded, and backwards thinking, because it's not based in the current reality. And the idea with the economy itself is still robust. Corporate earnings are still great. The unemployment is still at 50-year lows. Job wages have gone up. The economy, people are still buying things. It's not a question of the typical old way of thinking that if you have inflation, you have to force unemployment in order to tame it. No, what you need to do is simulate competition. And you do that by lowering interest rates so that people can start new companies that can compete and provide the same products at lower prices. This has been the time-honored way of dealing with companies that have prices that are artificially high, which they are now, because during the COVID pandemic, they had to raise them because there was a breakdown in the global distribution system. Now that the global distribution system has been repaired, they found that people will be willing to pay these prices. So they have no incentive to lower them. The only way they will be lowered is if the competitors are allowed to compete with the same products at lower prices. And then the prices will come down. So the Fed holding off on the interest rate, the reductions of the interest rates is terrible thinking. And it's harming the stock market now, but the market will be okay. There's no indication that there's any serious problem with the economy or that corporations are going to earn less. So the earnings reports will still be robust. People are still spending money. I think there's no signs of real trouble in the immediate future.
Remember also that there are trillions of dollars are sitting on the sidelines in the market, money markets and banks and so on. I've heard different numbers. The lowest is $6 trillion, $7 trillion, and on some accounts it's well over $10 trillion are sitting on the sidelines, earning 5% interest or more. And if you think, Milan, you said many times that historical returns on S&P is about 6%, and if people can, without any risk, earn 5% in markets, what is the incentive for these people ever to going back to the stock market? What do you think?
Exactly. Exactly that. And the 6% that I mentioned, a little over 6%, is inflation adjusted.
Yep.
And if we're suggested that we live on 4% of our portfolios, and here risk-free is available more than 4%, what else does somebody need to do? But we're always looking for leading indicators which will help us predict the market. And one of these leading indicators is on Wednesday, the markets are up. Today, it didn't work. no leading. When you look for books on leading indicators, there is a huge number of books on leading indicators. None of them work all the time, except dollar cost averaging the entire U.S. market if the source of income is from other than the market itself, from other earnings. For example, if people sell a business or inherit a great deal of money and they decided they're going to dollar cost average by dribbling it in, that doesn't work. It has to be a source of income other than the market itself on a regular basis. And that is the only totally predictable way of outperforming the market. But none of the other indicators work. For example, my recent experience, I'm looking for ideal conditions under which to sell covered calls. And ideal conditions are if the first 10 minutes of the market generally predict what will happen for the rest of the day. So that's one of the conditions. The other one is an inverted yield curve that predicts a recession, has done so reliably for over 50 years now. And the third one is a put-call ratio. So now if you have a negative put-call ratio, if you have an inverted yield curve, and if the first 10 minutes of the market are negative, that's an ideal time to sell covered calls. So I did yesterday. And guess what? It didn't work out.
I'd like to mention something that there were a lot of talk, even recently, about so-called soft lending. And the Fed's policy actually almost eliminates the possibility of soft lending because with interest rates so high, and I'm afraid they could go even higher. Especially with international situation in the world or so on, and that would kill soft lending. So unemployment will go high, the corporate earnings could stumble. So then, and only then, they would start to thinking about lower interest rates. But why would they drive such wonderful economy as it is now to a situation where there will not be a soft landing and will be all kind of calamities, including stock markets and so on. And there is no way to hide. Even if you will go and buy DJT, Donald Trump stock, there is no heaven there either, because a stock, even after it tumbled for so long time, there are some accounts that even if they would cost only $1 a share, the stock is still overpriced.
The real question is that the people who make decisions about interest rates are, first of all, very qualified, very intelligent, very highly trained, and nobody can really outdo what they are able to do. Why are they behaving this way today? Why are they maintaining the high interest rates?
I think it's because they're looking through an outdated prism. They're looking through inflation as a historical thing, and they're reacting to it by historical measures. And I think the danger is they will create an artificial recession if they continue with their approach. There's no reason for a recession right now. Yet, if rates remain high, they will produce it eventually. And this should not be their goal. But this has historically been the way that we've gotten out of high inflation in the past, is through recessions, by large unemployment, a lot of harm to the individual consumers, to the individual workers. And then inflation comes down, and then we all breathe a sigh of relief and we recover. Well, there's no sign of the need for a recovery now. There's no sign of a need for a recession now, except for the danger is the Fed will produce one artificially by maintaining this high interest rates. And what they're doing is treating inflation that was caused by a global pandemic and the breakdown of our global distribution system. Right. Products could not get to where the consumers wanted to buy them. And so prices went up accordingly. And we've had other things like a breakout of avian flu, which has caused prices of eggs to go up. These are not things that the Fed should be paying attention to, trying to manage. These are the types of things that come and go. And the pandemic is still, we still have COVID, but the global distribution system has repaired itself. Products can now get to the shelves and people can buy them. But companies are not lowering the prices because people are still paying them. So we have a higher, you ask people, wasn't it better? Weren't you better off 4 years ago? Yeah, before the pandemic, everybody was better off. Prices were lower. Yeah, but it was the pandemic. It's not the presidential policies or Fed policies that have anything to do with it. It was the pandemic. And if you get that through your head, which the Fed has to, I hope, someday, realize that the global distribution system has been repaired. There's no reason to keep interest rates artificially high.
Jim, I think one of the reasons of what's going on is that the Fed is fixating on 2% inflation.
Yeah, right.
Actually,
Yeah.
on CNBC, I've seen an interview with a lady. She's in charge of European Central Bank, and she said that we have to forget about 2% inflation. It may not be again for foreseeable future, maybe even never. Although you never say never, but in this situation, just forget it.
Just forget it.
2%.
And
So,
they might lower their interest rates before we do. You know, it's ridiculous. They seem to have figured it out more than the Fed has.
Exactly.
Really upsetting.
I think the European bank has more flexibility because it's a combination of several different banks from several different countries. So they're in fact more realistically can assess the situation than Fed when it's in charge of huge U.S. market and economy, and they fixating. It's very artificial. Why 2%? Why not 1.5%? Why not 2.5%?
Right.
Why 2% inflation? Where is it coming from?
Yes.
What's your opinion, Jim?
It's a historical thing that we have. It's hard for us to break free from what we were taught when we were young and what worked for many years. And the situation has changed in this global economic environment now. The situations have changed. European economies have not recovered as well as the U.S. recovery has from the global pandemic. It affected everybody. Inflation hit the entire world, didn't just hit the U.S. economy. It affected European economies as well. The European economies have come out of it, but not as strongly as the U.S. market has. The U.S. market, the economy has been robust. It's been great. You know, by any historical standard, it's been fantastic. The stock market is way ahead of where it was.
Yeah. Did you say, Jim, that it's hard for us to break free of what we were taught early in life?
Yeah. Yes, I did say that.
Yeah. Give me a child till he is 7 and I shall have him forever is what the Catholic Church is saying today. But they got that from Socrates, who went to his death for influencing the young. So that concept has been around for a very long time. Now, the comforting thing is, though, that from every recession in the past, the market has recovered and went on to new heights.
Yes.
And it won't be any different this time around either.
Oh, I agree. But why cause one artificially? Let it happen naturally. You know, there's just no reason for the Fed to maintain interest rates so high. And, you know, we talked a little bit about like the 10-year bonds that you can get from the Treasury now. Very, very, very low risk. They're over 4.5% now. I forget exactly how much, but over 4.5%. And so you can get a marginal return over inflation, just a marginal return. How exciting is that? It's just not very exciting at all. You know, if you're breaking even with inflation is basically what your goal is. Come on, I want to exceed inflation. I want to, whatever inflation is, I want to have a rate of return above and beyond that.
I keep asking this question: who benefits from inflation? Borrowers do. You borrow $1,000, you borrow X bucks, and then 5 years, 3 years, 10 years down the road, you return the same $10,000, the same amount of money, which now has less purchasing power than it did when you borrowed it. So you are ahead that way. And who is the leading borrower on the planet? Government, generally, in the United States government for sure. They don't have an interest in eliminating inflation because they benefit from it.
Well, right now, the U.S. debt is paying so much in interest. It's a staggering amount.
Yeah.
And it would seem to be in their best interest to reduce rates so
Yeah.
that even the interest they're paying on their national debt would be less burdensome. It seems to me that all signs are pointing towards the Fed to lower interest rates, and they seem to be poised to do so. But the latest returns, which are, the last few months, it's been a little bit hotter inflation-wise than they wanted. But this is not the thing that they should be paying attention to, in my opinion. That's historical thinking. Oh my goodness, we want to get to 2%, and we're hovering at a higher level. But inflation was way up and is now way down. It's not to where they have this magic number that they wanted to get to. But why not live with what it is right now and reduce the rates so that companies can start up? You talk to people, I live in Silicon Valley, you talk to people in startups, and it's crippling, it's burdensome what you're putting onto these people to get started.
Every large company started out as a small company, and you need startups in order for the economy to grow.
Especially in this day and age, we have AI, we have all of this technology that is brand new, and these companies can come in and do, companies like Amazon have done tremendous jobs by making their point of sales delivery, the last mile of a delivery system, is the most costly. And they've figured out ways that are really remarkable in order to become more efficient at it. Well, these types of opportunities present themselves to a lot of different companies. And you can, if these companies are successful, lower the cost of delivery, lower the cost of goods, lower inflation naturally, not artificially maintaining it at a high level as we are doing today.
Actually, I would like to propose for Fed, let's see 3 scenarios of this juncture. Let's say they will keep interest rates same. They will not change them for foreseeable future, for months, 3 months, whatever. Scenario number 2, they will actually put up interest rates, say 0.5 percentage points. That will be a very serious blow to the economy, to stock markets, to unemployment, everywhere. Scenario number 3, they will lower rate for 0.5 point. What would you think would happen in this case?
Oh, if they lowered the rates, I think you would see the stock market go up, and I think you would see a lot of volume, and you would see more money coming in.
Always has done so in the past. Always has done so in the past. Yeah.
And it just seems to be that they've spooked the market periodically with talks of interest rates being lowered and then not lowering them. And this Wednesday, we normally see green on Wednesdays and we see red today. It's because the Fed chairman has indicated that, hey, we may not be lowering interest rates anytime soon. So of course the market reacts this way. It's very predictable. But it's very avoidable. If the Fed chairman would just say, we're planning on lowering interest rates 0.25% sometime this fall. The market would love that.
So there must be a reason why they not only not lowering interest rates, but they are not even talking about lowering rates anytime soon. Now, so what is the downside of lowering interest rates, or say not even 0.5 point, even 1/4 point? Why they are so adamant about keeping this interest rates level?
The answer is simply that they think that would cause an overstimulated economy, which would cause more inflation. Now, the problem is not, and has not been in the 2020s, an overstimulated economy. You have a robust economy, but it is not overstimulated. It's not causing inflation by itself. The cause of the inflation was the global pandemic and the breakdown of our economic distribution system worldwide, throughout the globe. Now, that has been repaired. There is no reason to artificially cause this recession that they think will cure inflation. And the problem with not lowering the interest rates, or if you do lower interest rates and the stock market goes up and companies get more money, they think that this will be bad. There's no historical indication that this would be bad. Now, the economy has not been too hot, and that's what they're afraid of. The economy will become too good. Tell me when was it bad to have a good economy?
We're talking a lot about inflation. Inflation in North America is next to nothing compared to inflation in many other parts of the world. Take a
Oh,
look at
absolutely.
Venezuela, take a look at Serbia, take a look at so many African nations. There's so many
South
countries.
American countries.
And
Yeah,
it's huge by comparison. Huge.
absolutely true, Nuala.
Mark, what's your opinion on inflation?
Inflation is definitely something that a lot of people are impacted by and definitely trying to figure that out. One of the things I was getting ready to ask both of you and everything is this notion of Biden apparently went to Pennsylvania and he is talking about this idea of calling for more taxes on the rich. And of course, he's always cast Trump as an elitist. So I just wondered, will we actually get the rich to pay, quote unquote, their fair share? Because that is apparently what he is asking for, because he went to his area of Pennsylvania. And a lot of people know he's got roots in both Pennsylvania and Delaware, and he's asking for folks to, ask the rich to pay more than they might have been doing in the past.
I think, Mark, I think that the answer to your question is very simple. The people who control the money also control the political process. They are not going to do anything that will increase the taxes which they need to pay. That's just not going to happen.
And this comes into the bottom, the old, 50 years ago, Milton Friedman was, an esteemed economist, and he was a brilliant writer. But he didn't have the data that we have now. There's no such thing as a trickle down effect. It's, the Economic School of London that, did a 50-year study, and, it's never happened and never will. And the idea that if the wealthy get wealthier, they will create more jobs. No, that hasn't been true for 50 years. What we've done is ship jobs overseas so that we get the labor costs are lower. And then we reward the CEOs by giving them mega millions of.
Well, apparently we're trying to reward a major CEO in that case, because apparently, a lot of people talking, y'all have talked before about Tesla, and apparently Tesla is asking their shareholders to reinstate Musk $56 billion pay package. So they are wanting to move the company to Texas and also give Mr. Musk some nice windfall of a salary and all along those lines, because apparently that was tossed out by the courts and now they want to bring it back. So maybe he's going to get this additional salary and everything. Hey, Jim, Sasha just asked me that question, and I bought a couple of items from the store. Actually, just went and got some soup and some other things not that long ago and everything. If you hear some of these people that are talking, particularly some of those on the Republican side, you would think that we were spending $15 on orange juice and $20 on the milk and a number of these other kind of prices. And the last time I checked, I was not paying those kind of prices and everything. So is there sometimes when we talk of inflation, and I'm not saying that inflation doesn't exist, but is there some things where they are being overly put out? So the numbers are put out there that are mythological and everything. Because like I said, I know that gas prices are going up, and while I don't drive, I have friends that drive on a regular basis and everything. I do know that I've got to get my milk and some of the other items that I need to get, including bread. And that is not as overpriced as sometimes people would make it out to be.
Well, I have a very simple question. If milk is so expensive, why people wouldn't buy their own cows and get their own milk?
That's my point. I'm saying it's not as expensive as they try to make it out to be. That was where I was going, Sasha. Exactly. So if that was the case,
Milan and I don't have to worry about gas prices. The more electronic vehicles there are out there, the less we'll have to be dependent upon them. And we do have to wean ourselves off of oil. But I want to double down on what Milan said. The wealthy have been buying the politicians for a long time now, and no politician is going to pass policy that is going to affect the wealthy in a negative
except
way.
Biden is going exactly against the trend. He's going against wealthy. I think it's a little bit somewhat populist policy on his part, but there's an election.
And he's to be commended for it. But he won't be. He'll be attacked.
Yeah, anyway, you look at it. Mark, we discussed today the homeless situation in America. It's not only America, it's in Canada. There's a lot of homeless people in Toronto. Interesting that a lot of homeless people in Toronto, even when they are provided shelter and some facilities, especially in wintertime, they don't want to use these facilities. They want to stay on the streets.
Yeah.
They find some warm places when there's a warm air is coming from underground. So and the winter was quite mild this year, and they don't want to stay anywhere.
Well, there is a thing that we don't like to talk about, which is part of the homeless problem, which is mental illness.
Yeah.
Mental
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a serious problem, and left untreated, produces the things that we see.
Not just the mental illness, not just the mental illness, but also the restrictions. Because I do know some people that, for whatever reasons, had to stay in those homeless shelters. And to your point, Sasha, sometimes they would not want to stay there because they were required to be out by certain hours, required to be in by certain hours, and sometimes the job market might not even dictate that, because maybe their job had them going till 7, but they're supposed to be in by, say, 6. And I'm not saying that those are exact times and everything. I do know that there were
well taken.
Frustrated by the restrictions that they had in some of those.
Yeah. But I was talking to a colleague who is a member of parliament in Barbados and who is responsible for housing, and he stated that the number that we're talking about here, the percentage of people who are the way we describe here, who are unwell, is actually quite small, and we pay a lot of attention to them, but it's not a large percentage. And now, with so many people working from home, there's an enormous amount of building space that's not used anymore.
Yes.
And that could be converted to residential. They have to do serious work on plumbing and wiring and waste elimination and that sort of stuff. But it's certainly doable at a much lower cost than starting from scratch. And so is that beginning to happen? Are they converting office buildings to residential buildings?
That's a difficult thing to do. And also there's a strong, we call it NIMBY, not in my backyard, phenomenon that you run into. It's like, build affordable housing just somewhere else. And you run into that in municipality after municipality. You run into people that support it in general, but not specifically around where they live.
What's curious, and what I'm thinking about is that obviously homeless people, they don't have their voice. They're not being invited on television, radio, or anywhere else.
True.
So the only people who are talking about homeless problems is very rich people, and they're doing it from the populist point of view. And average people who have jobs, families, and so on, and a lot of problems of their own. So I'm a little bit skeptical about the genuine way that these people are discussing this problem. And I'm asking myself, wait a sec, something is not right. The homeless people, they have no voice. The people, everyday's life, who are working and have families, they have too many problems of their own to be worried about homeless people or so on. Besides homeless people, if they really want it, there are options available like trailers park, the mobile homes, many of this. I know, actually I read it on a German produced website about the life in America. They showed a lot of mobile parks where the people are sleeping in their cars and they have good, well-paying jobs. But they cannot afford to rent an apartment. So they are staying and they're sleeping in their cars, going to work, going back to the park and so on, and sleep in their cars and so on. So there are a lot of problems in America. It's not just homeless, because actually homeless people have funny thing to say. They have less problems to worry about because obviously they're getting a subsidy from the government. They can get by. They're buying cheaper food somewhere, maybe not today's produce, but yesterday's or the day before yesterday's or so. So they learn their way how to deal with this. It's people who are trying to maintain their normal way of life, to keep the job and trying to get out of the hole. And they are, in my opinion, in most precarious positions.
You're describing the squeeze the middle class has been feeling.
Totally the middle class squeeze, and I definitely can relate to that and everything. I will say, because I've known some people that did what you just described. Actually, a couple of my coworkers were actually living out of their cars and all along those lines. And it is not as easy as people might think it is. It
Oh,
can actually
no.
be quite difficult to do. And I've known at
Of
least
course it
2 or 3 individuals that have gone through that process. They might try to find a public accommodation, whether that's a Y or something like that, to get their showers and the very basic needs that are needed to achieve a life and everything. And I don't know if you've heard of this expression, Sasha, but they do say that some of that government cheese and some of that government food is not always the best quality either. That is something that even those
Agreed.
in the homeless space will tell you, that some of the things that they get are sometimes often outdated and not in the best of shape, and even add to your health problems and all along those lines. And those trailers, because I remember having, and maybe Jim can relate to this as well, because I know that it's popular out there in West Coast. Those trailers you talk about, those trailer parks and everything, those things are not exactly overly inexpensive, because I do know some folks that have had trailers, and those trailers can be almost as expensive as a house, if depending on what kind of trailer they are getting and all in that space. I know that because we use trailers with the blues festivals that I was part of as our dressing room for the performers that were coming in and everything. But yeah, those things are not cheap.
I'm not
People
suggesting
living
that,
in. Go ahead,
I'm
Sasha.
not
Sorry.
suggesting the trailers park unless you have luxurious trailer worth a couple $100,000. I don't think that this is a luxury lifestyle, not
No.
at all. But you know, I'm thinking about something. If the polarization between super rich and the rest, of course, including homeless, if cannot be somehow, I don't think it can be solved, but at least somewhat like make it easier on their lives, then more people will start pay attention to a very famous writer of 19th century by the name Karl Marx, who describes certain ways to deal with the problems of inequality and so on. I think America is just too far away from that. But if a lot of people, like certain portion of population, will start pay attention to that, and they will follow very easy principles described by Marx, that would be way much more serious problem. Now, mind you, what Marx suggested, he did it brilliantly. I read Das Kapital. It's a great book. The problem with that is that, at least the way it was implemented in Russia, it leads even to more inequality than one exists today in the United States. So the cure is much more dangerous than the illness itself. So even that is not solution.
A friend of mine says in a Russian school, a teacher says, "What's the difference between capitalism and socialism?" And a student says, "Under capitalism, man exploits man. Under socialism, it's the other way around."
Either way, man is exploiting man. Good point and everything. Speaking of exploitation, that's a good one. I like that one a lot. Speaking of exploitation and everything, one of the things I was curious about for this esteemed panel is there was a powerful airline that got into trouble, and I think that they've been in trouble for a while, that being Boeing and everything. But apparently United is actually doing well. So I'm trying to figure that out, because don't they use a lot of Boeing equipment? So I'm trying to figure out how their stock jumped if they are using a lot of their fleet being Boeing. And I could be wrong and everything, but they're saying that the Boeing Alaska blowout cost it $200 million, but they also said that they're expecting a 13% jump in their stock. So as y'all are in this investment and stock space, please explain this to me, to somebody that is not in this space, because if I'm like the common man, which I oftentimes am, I'm going like that. The logic doesn't make sense.
Boeing has an enormous amount of orders that they have to fill, and sales are guaranteed. Enormous amount. They're going to be okay. Now, back to housing. How do we get this way? The average house today is double the size of the house that we grew up in as children and had happy lives. Does it need to be as large as it is today? That's one thing. And the other thing is that the paperwork that precedes the beginning of construction is half of the cost of building a house today. Do we need all those regulations and building code differences? when a builder puts a shovel in the ground to start digging the basement, he is already half finished. And the half that precedes the shovel in the ground is all paperwork and building codes and regulations that need to be simplified, that can be simplified, that should be simplified.
Well,
But
I'll
be
tell you,
simplified because the primary objective of any regulatory agency is to perpetuate its lifespan. Yeah.
I'll tell you my own example. We had a beautiful house, 35 square feet, 3,500 square feet, and then we decided when we just stayed two of us, we decided to downsize and we sold the house and we bought condo. It's a nice condo, 1,300 square feet, so on. And at that time, we thought, oh my God, it's so small, how we can live in there and so on. But there were pluses because, okay, you're paying maintenance, you don't have to worry about doing any work outside of the house, and especially winter time. So there are a lot of pluses. All amenities, tennis courts, and you can play inside and outside and so on. Now, today, when I look at the market, the all new houses, I'm talking about apartments being built in Toronto. The few years ago, 700 square feet apartment looked like, what is that? It's impossible to live there. And most of the buyers were Chinese people, immigrants, and otherwise. And today they're building now 500 square feet apartments in Toronto. So our apartment, actually, it's almost like a giant apartment. They're not building these apartments anymore. Period.
But Sasha, isn't that the problem? Because I can tell you that right here in Durham, North Carolina, which is considered the Research Triangle Park, I will, well, not today, but later on this week, I'll go back down in the downtown area, and I can tell you that there are probably at least 6 or 7 new buildings that are going up in construction that are new apartments and all along those lines. And a lot of them are nowhere near full occupancy. As a matter of fact, some of them might even be at 50% or less and everything. So there's a number of people that are building because the market is telling them to build for whatever reasons and all along those lines, but they're not being filled. And even though those homeless people could probably go into some of those places, because I know that there are a number of them that are quite empty and all along those lines. So I think part of the problem is that there is overbuilding, and even to what you were saying, Milan, there are some people that are in nicer houses than they were when they were first in the housing market and everything. But I know quite a few people that are still living in what used to be termed shotgun houses, which, you know, the notion of a shotgun house is that if a shot is fired, it can go literally through the whole house and everything. So there are a number of people that live in those kind of houses, both here on the East Coast and even where Jim is at on the West Coast. And I don't want to say, because it's been a minute. Well, actually, I've never been to the West Coast, but I've got friends out there and everything. That, am I not thinking correctly, Jim, that there are a number of people that are living in these what we would consider rinky-dink houses? I'm thinking about like places not just Compton, but LA and a number of other places as well.
Oh, of course, that's true. Where I live in Silicon Valley, you can get what we used to think of as a cottage, but not for less than $1.5 million. It's unbelievable. And, you know, what I experienced, you know, just walking my dog, there was always construction going on because people were buying, Google money came in, Meta money came in, you know, all of this kind of wealth descended. And people were tearing down the homes that were perfectly good homes that were there, the kind of home that you might have grown up in. And building, two-story giant kind of homes. What they wanted was the lot, the land.
The lot, sure.
They didn't want the building. They didn't want the home. So I saw that happen over and over and over again. And that might just be the microcosm that I live in. But it was the fact of life is that I don't know how people get started here, because nothing is affordable. Even places that are tiny, by my mind, my way of thinking, are priced at, there's an extra zero is the way I put it. It's like they've added an extra zero to everything around here. So everything, I don't know how people can do it, even get started. Even if I don't think
it's just San Francisco. I think that's New York. I think that's DC, because I've heard some of the prices that are in those areas that are ridiculous in terms of the prices that they are given. As I said on this show once before, and I've said it on some other shows as well, one of the things that we've done here in the South is we've repurposed old properties and everything. So one of the things that has been very much known, there are some restaurants, there are some convenience centers and everything, but they have turned those old tobacco warehouses into apartments, and these are not cheap houses. One of them is called West Village, and I think the going rate is somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 to $2,000 a month or something.
Are we building affordable homes now? And the answer around me is no.
With affordable homes, I think there is one problem. Somebody has to acquire the land, have building permits, has to erect the apartment house or house, standalone structure. And most of these people, if not all of them, they're doing it for profit.
Yes, of course. Right.
And if that's the case, even I remember many years ago, there were co-ops in Toronto where some people would get together and they would build their house or so on. But you know what? It didn't last long, because a few years later they would privatize it and they would make it a condominium or so on. And then they would sell these apartments or so on. And that's not a long-term solution either. So on the other hand, real estate is a very fair business. It's a law of supply and demand, because if there are so many houses available, obviously the price would go lower. And if they're not readily available, even this little 700 square feet apartments in Toronto area, and there is a healthy demand, so these apartments, they cost $600,000-$700,000, believe it or not. They're like a fraction of what I would think is available as an apartment or possible to live. 700 square feet, we'll put it like hotel room, basically, with a kitchen and toilet. Still.
The case Shiller, Shiller is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and I don't know who Case was, but they keep a track of 20 cities in the United States and show the housing prices over the last very long period of time. And so the Case-Shiller index has actually done half as well as owning the United States stock market by having an exchange-traded fund which tracks the S&P 500. And the difficulty with real estate is it lacks liquidity. In a lot of places, real estate has gone up much higher than the stock market. Toronto would be an example. San Francisco would be an example. And there are Vancouver, there are examples of that sort. But the lack of liquidity is a problem there, unless people invest in real estate investment trusts, REITs. Real estate.
Never been a fan.
You can get in and out in a matter of minutes.
That's true.
And so that would be
it's much more liquid
to invest in real estate. The other thing that I've seen, and that works not all the time, is a couple, two families that get along really well, buy a house and share it, especially if it has an upstairs and a downstairs, which is livable, so they can have a lot of privacy, but they share in the cost of acquiring that house.
Well, that speaks highly about owning real estate where you actually live. That's ownership, obviously very beneficial. It will go higher in price. I don't know how quickly or how not so quickly.
But when I was a child, you had one income, and then when I became an adult, you had to have two incomes in order to afford to live.
But Jim, along those same lines, one of the things that's becoming very popular was the house that Mom bought at one point. It was actually a house she bought for me and my younger brother when we were living together before he got married and everything. So this was decades ago. She eventually sold that house, and the people that bought it turned it into a duplex, to kind of what Milan is talking about. So they now have more than one income because they are able to rent the other half of the house, and they are one of several people I know here in this area that have converted their houses into duplexes and in some cases triplexes, so that they can get some additional revenue from that particular house property. And I can tell you that the value from when Mom sold it to now is, because I do sometimes look at Zillow to see what the price is actually higher now that it is a duplex property and everything.
There's an additional impact here additional to two incomes is the use of credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
in order to have money. Yeah. Mhm.
But in that same space, one of the things that I was curious about, because there was a very popular brand of vehicle, and that's another thing that people invest in quite a bit is their car. And it was a popular brand, but it got a double whammy of bad news because it was very much prominent in the OJ trial, and then it also had some recalls and everything because of their battery issues. So Ford had to recall the Bronco, and we do know that OJ just recently passed and everything, dealing with his prostate cancer illness, and did recently die, and all along those lines. And everybody remembers that infamous chase and everything where he was in the Ford Bronco, and now there are 456 of those that are being recalled over the battery issue. So I'm thinking Ford did not exactly like the news of last week, because they were in the news twice, once for the history of the old history, and now for the new history as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't think we can finish this program without talking about my favorite stock, Nvidia, which tanked today along with all markets. But it's doing everything according to my scenario, which I described last 2-3 programs, is that it has to find its trading range. It has resistance at 800, although it never reached it lately, but 850, actually it broke down from 850 even today. And there is a resistance 900. It's very clear to me that it has to find its trading range. I would expect that it will go down to maybe 825, 830. It has to become attractive again on its fundamentals. It's not there yet, so it will go lower. How you can possibly benefit from it? I'll tell you how. If you will look at situation as of it is now, today, as we speak. So the stock is about 850. It fluctuates. It opened today actually 886, I believe, and then it quickly started downward movement. It went as low as 847, 45 maybe even. And so the situation right now is this. As we speak, NVIDIA is now 849.73 or 83, say 850 to make it simple. Now, you can see that December 20 calls, December with a strike price of 960, which is far away from where it's trading today, they still cost $109. It means $10,000 now, almost $11,000 for each call. So let's see if I have 200 shares. So I can sell covered calls that I just described for $22,000. And most likely, although I'm not certain on that, but still, you can keep all this premium to yourself. Your downside is that stock may go lower to support level of 800, maybe 820. It's possible. Now, on the other hand, if it will go up to say 900, stock will be taken away from you. You will keep all the premium, and you will make money on stock if you buy around 850 now, and it will be taken away from you only in case that the stock will reach 960 by December, which is very possible. So you will then you will keep the premium, and you will deliver stock at 960, which you purchased today at 850. What could be so wrong with this scenario, Jim?
Well, I have there's no downside to that scenario.
there is a downside in Canada in that in tax advantaged accounts, when you're assigned and the stock is taken away from you and you're now in cash, you should be able to use that cash to sell cash covered puts. But you cannot do that.
No. You're looking at the second step. I'm describing just first step. It's very easy.
Right.
Tax advantage or no tax advantage. I'm talking about fundamentals. You're buying stock at around 850. It will be taken away if it will be taken away at 960. It's likely, but not certain scenario. Especially now, if interest rates will remain the same, maybe even move higher. So we don't know really what's going to happen. Right. I thought that the stock in this year, 2024, it will reach $100,000. Also, I have probably 50% chance that it will be split, probably 4-1, which also will be very positive.
Well,
Again,
that's at this price, it's likely that.
it's
And
like, yeah,
Sasha, I remember when the host, not Mark, but the host laughed at you when you said it would hit 500.
They must have been Nick or somebody else like
Oh,
that.
it was Nick.
Yeah, I can
He
see Nick
saw it.
doing that. But speaking of that, and all along those lines and everything, there's a certain thing that goes on that y'all all three have told me that is a total con, and I have no reason to doubt that, even though some people tell me that they are making money in this venture and everything, that being the notion of Bitcoins. And I did read recently that they have dropped 10% in the last 5 days, but they said that they are doing that intentionally because they claim that they like to keep a low amount in circulation. So they're doing something that they call halving, which is what they do when they try to reduce the amount of circulation and everything. So they are claiming that they are going down, but they will have a rise because as we listen to their
Like
folks,
Pee Wee Herman used to
they claim
say,
that it
"I
happens
meant to
every
do
4
that."
years. Huh?
actually, it's not
Pee Wee
logical.
Herman used to say, "I meant to do that" when he fell over.
Wait a second, Mark. I don't understand the logic. If they want to make it less available, so it should become even more valuable because if it's
No,
not,
that is what they say because of what
More
the
people
article
buy
I
when
was
it's
reading
lower
says
price.
that halving is when the reward for Bitcoin mining is cut in half to reduce the amount of coins in circulation. It happens about every 4 years, and they claim that after the halving takes place, so I guess they cut the value in half, that then it increases the value. And like I said, I'm not in that space. I do know folks that are in that space, but they claim that they do that intentionally and that they have been doing it every 4 years because the article that I read said every 4 years the reward for Bitcoin mining is cut in half to reduce the amount of coins in circulation. So I did hear that from a number of people that the notion is that you want to keep lesser amount in circulation because
Well, there
that
aren't too many 4-year intervals because Bitcoin has not been around that long. So you don't have a lot of history to go on.
wait
There.
a sec. I want to go back to basics. The reason the stock or Bitcoin, or it doesn't matter what, going down in price, only one reason to the way I understand it, there are more sellers than buyers. I don't see any other reasons for any commodity, product, shares.
They're talking about manipulating stock prices. You know,
that's
You
what
cannot,
they're talking
but listen, we cannot manipulate anything. Even Hunt brothers who wanted to manipulate silver
Oh,
price
yeah.
in the 80s, even they couldn't do it. They were probably one of the richest people in the world at that time, and they couldn't do it.
They went bankrupt. Yeah.
Well, speaking of good news, and this is maybe good news for Donald Trump, since you mentioned Donald Trump earlier and everything, but there is a very popular brand that is saying that they are going to be having an increase in sales. So maybe it's going to increase his sales as well, because we know that in addition to what he's done with his stock, he's got his sneakers and everything. And apparently Adidas, and everybody knows about Adidas, is a very popular brand, has raised their profit guidance on robust footwear demand. So they're saying that there's going to be a robust demand for footwear. And all along those lines, I think they're going with their iconic Samba brand, which I think is out there, and a number of others as well. But hey, maybe Mr. Trump can use this to hype the sales of his own sneaker brands. It's apparently the sportswear giant Adidas. And by the way, they are on the stock exchange. You can find them as ADDYY. Has raised their full year profit market target for 2024, citing strong ongoing demand for its legacy footwear products, including that iconic Samba sneaker that I just talked about, as well as the sale of its remaining Yeezy inventory. So maybe.
Mark, I think you should put a bundle on sale, sneakers plus Bible, and give a 10% discount. I think that would be a good move. You'll sell a lot of both.
There's one born every minute. So
absolutely, this is why he was so much for abortions, because he said there is a sucker born every minute, and I need as many suckers as ever possible. So, okay, so with that, I would like to end today's program. Thank you so much for participation and contributing to that. And I'll see you next week, same place, same time. Have a successful trading. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for running the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have any technical difficulties. I will go the other way. Just leave the room and I will close it out from elsewhere.